I'm Dennis Anderson along with Julie Zenner, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
The Duluth School Board got an early look at its 2019 budget this week, and projections show another budget deficit may be on the horizon.
The annual count of the homeless in St. Louis County is coming up next week, and local groups are ramping up for the effort.
And we'll have the week's top business stories from Business North.
Almanac North next. Stay with us. Well, hello again and welcome to Almanac North, and thank you very much for watching. And Julie, nice to have a little January thaw after all the bitter cold weather we've been having.
Oh, it certainly did feel good to get out a little bit this week.
Nice to see the cars starting right away and can't see your breath quite so much.
All right, but more bad stuff on the way, I hear.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right, your turn. Go right ahead.
All right, thank you, Denny, and welcome everyone. The Duluth School Board got an early look at its potential 2019 budget this week, and the projections look daunting. School District CFO Doug Hassler presented a preliminary budget for fiscal 2019 that shows a nearly $4 million general fund deficit. But he said that number is the worst case, and some of the projections, such as the % increase of health insurance, could change. Well, joining us to talk budget and other issues is David Kirby, chair of the Duluth School Board. And thank you so much for coming in and visiting with us tonight.
Well,
the board just had to deal with a deficit in the current budget. What's driving the projected budget deficit as you look forward?
Well, as Mr. Hassler said, these are projected worst-case scenarios, and hopefully it won't be quite as bad. But it is significant. We are not the only district in the state doing this. I think Minneapolis is $33 million projected deficit. But there's lots of things that do this. Even though the state legislature gave us more money per student this year, it still doesn't have the buying power that the 2003 stuff they gave us bought. So we're really far behind even from that. The state mandates a lot of things, for example, for students with special needs, but they don't fund that. A rough estimate is we get about 60% of what's mandated, to cover what's mandated. And there's a cap on that. And then further, in districts with significant charter school, we are responsible for a lot of that too. And that those bills are given to us after the fact. So it's a lot of surprises in some cases.
So as you look ahead, David, are there still areas in which you can pare back, pare down a little bit, make some cuts?
Well, we may have to. It's not going to be easy. I think that the school district's doing a lot of great things, and I think that people don't realize that a lot of times. It's part of the infrastructure of the city, just like roads and bridges are, and the more we maintain it and keep it in good shape, we're going to attract business, we're going to attract professionals and things like that. So it's important we do this. Our enrollment is up this year. Now that may not be a long trend, but it's a step in the right direction after a lot of years. We're increasing our pre-K. We're making investments as it is. Our pre-K programs, we have immersion programs in Ojibwe and Spanish, which are robust and growing. Our construction and technical trades have partnered with Lake Superior College, and they're building a house. We have a lot of student teachers from St. Scholastica, University of Minnesota Duluth, who are in the schools, and that can also help. The teachers and the staff are top-notch, and they're all doing good things, and I think people don't see this. So all of those things are present. Do we want to have to increase class sizes? No. Do we want to have to cut back benefits for people or let people go? No. But it's too early to tell right now what might have to be done.
Well, you got a little bit of a reprieve, as you said, from the state. that avoided some cuts that you were thinking about having to need this year, will those then be kind of kicked down the road?
Well, a lot of the benefits you get and a lot of the cuts you make are one-term cuts. They're not things that will go on and on. So every year it's worse. If we can increase more students to our district, that will help. We're working with state legislators to try and change the special education funding, which is a statewide problem. It's not just here, to see if that will help as well. There's only so much money, and
yeah, David, I think this is a good place to insert this question. You talked about a little bit about trying to get more students. Is the school system doing anything to promote the school system or the school district?
Yes. I was just being on programs like this to tell people what we do is one thing. We're trying to get out to parents to spread the word. Probably the best way to increase is by word of mouth by parents who have their children in the school. And so we're trying to do more of that. There are articles in the paper, I think the East and the West Side, I forget what it's called now, the Duluth News Tribune does that. We have articles in there to try and show what we're doing. And the programs that we have, as I mentioned, the immersion program, the career and technical stuff, the music programs we have. If you went to the Denfeld and East music programs, they were fantastic, or the plays they put on, the musicals. I mean, there's a lot of talent here, and we need to show that. And a lot of the surrounding districts do not have those things.
How stable have the numbers been in recent years? Do you see any trends growing in terms of enrollment?
This year, yes, there are. It depends. There are different cohorts of grade levels. Some grade levels are higher and lower. But this year it has been up. Over the last, 10 years, it's been slowly down, but this year it's up. So hopefully that's a trend. I don't want to say it is, but it's a step in the right direction.
David, what's the school board doing to balance out areas of inequity?
Well, we have an Office of Educational Equity, and in that area, William House, who's the director, is formulating a community-based tool to use so that we can apply equity as it's defined in the community during this period to all of our decisions. That's a big undertaking, and we're doing that. Equity has a lot of nuances, I guess you would say.
How would you describe equity? Equal players between...
Well, it's not equality. Equality and equity are different.
Yes, they are.
And so it's giving students what they need. And some students need more than others. And so you try and do that. Given the constraints of the budget that you have, to some degree, that's the reality of it. And we're having some conversations about that. We will at the next school board meeting, actually.
Are there some examples of inequities that you see within the schools as a school board member that you look at and you go, that's really something that needs to be fixed?
Well, I think that everyone knows that our graduation rates are different for differing groups of students. Test scores are different for differing groups of students. And again, that's not unique to Duluth by any means. And if anybody had a ready answer, I'm sure we'd all be using it. But I think that we're doing that. We're getting cultural competency training for the staff all the time. That's ongoing. There's things called professional learning communities where teachers get together and talk about specific students all the time. And those things like that are in place and are helping.
And drawing in diverse members of the community too to work with
Well,
the
we would
school
like to
district?
get more teachers of color, for example, but that's difficult. There aren't many in the state. I think last year there were 74 in the state of Minnesota. Well, how are they going to come here if there's no family here? I mean, people come to areas to teach where they grew up or where they have family, and so it's a difficult thing. But we're constantly working at that.
So how do you raise funding for equity? I mean, you have to spend money.
You have to spend money. There are certain programs, like Title I programs, compensatory education programs that give the school money based on certain criteria, but a lot of these funds are targeted. You can't spread them around. And so some of them you can, and that's one of the conversations we're having now. How much do you spread around and how much do you spend at certain places? So it's somewhat complex.
It almost sounds like there's a lot of attention given to this issue.
There is. And I think that everybody on the school board is aware of this. In June, we passed a resolution that said that we would take compensatory education funds over time and place them in the schools that generate them. They're all based on students who receive free and reduced lunch. The difficulty is changing that all of a sudden means that schools that were getting some of that funding will not, and that raises a lot of difficulties for them. So there's one pot of money, and it's kind of a zero-sum game. You have to spread it around and try and make everybody happy, which isn't always the case.
Mm-hmm. Duluth right now, as a city, is undergoing a comprehensive planning process. Is the school district working with the city at all on that, or are there issues that you think within the schools that kind of overlap that could be addressed through that comprehensive planning process?
Over the past 2 years I've been on the board, the city, county, school board cooperation has been pretty good. It's getting much better. And in fact, we have what's called a committee of the whole meeting later on this month or early next month about that comprehensive plan and how we can fit in. Housing is a big problem in the city, and it affects the schools drastically. We don't have any direct influence on that, but we're certainly a player and it affects us, and so we want to be part of the solution.
A number of new school board members on the board. Learning curve is, especially with all of these big financial challenges going on?
Yes. I always say that learning school finance is worse than biochemistry. It's bad. But they're smart people, and they're committed people, and they have new ideas, and they're energetic, so I think they'll do well.
All right. Well, Board Chair David Kirby, thank you so much for coming in and sharing with us some information about where things are at with the school district. People are always interested in what's happening with their kids' education.
They are.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
He is.
Well, the state of Minnesota's 3.1% jobless rate set a 17-year low this week. But even with an improving economy, there are still people who are homeless in our community. Next week is the annual homeless count in St. Louis County. The survey is important because money and resources to fight homelessness is allocated based on these numbers. And so joining us to talk about it is Stacy Radosevich, the homeless program coordinator for St. Louis County. Deb Holman is a street outreach worker for Churches United in Ministry, and Joel Kilgour is chair of the Duluth Affordable Housing Coalition. Thanks to all of you for being here now. And Stacy, I wonder if I could start with you tonight. How does the county go about counting homeless people, and how do you get the most accurate count as possible? Seems like a daunting project.
It is, especially considering the size of St. Louis County. We have a lot of places established for people to come and take the surveys. The federal government requires this count to be about one night, so it's January 24th, Wednesday. So what we've done is we've created an event the next day, which in Duluth is at the Damiano Center, where we provide services and lunch and have a lot of volunteers come and do the surveys. And then in northern St. Louis County, we have all kinds of volunteers and case managers that go out tromping through looking for encampments. The other piece of it is we're trying to reach people who are doubled up. They do not count as homeless in the federal count, but we keep that data that is considered homeless in Minnesota. And that's people who are living with friends or family and don't have their own lease or their own bedroom or their own place to
I
be.
see.
Deb, you're a street outreach worker also with the Human Development Center. You've been doing this for a lot of years, going out and doing the homeless counts. Does anything still shock you out on the street as you're going out and meeting people and trying to get these numbers together and their circumstances together?
Well, I think the biggest shock is that we haven't solved it. I think it's a solvable problem. And how do we allow people, in our community to sleep outside in 20 below, 30 below weather? I do think there's a new nationwide system called the Coordinated Entry System. So any person that's experiencing homelessness usually accesses this system through the United Way, but outreach workers can do it too. And so what it is a vulnerability index scoring tool. So anyone that's homeless would, depending on their vulnerabilities, they look at different tiers like, addiction, length of homelessness, physical health, mental health. That's a tool to assess vulnerabilities. So people with higher scores will move into housing first because they're considered more vulnerable. While I was once a skeptic of this system, I have seen it work recently, and I think we're doing a good job in St. Louis County getting people off the streets. In my personal opinion, the number of people sleeping in tents is down. However, considering the weather, the shelter is overflowing. Loaves and Fishes is overflowing, taking in people on cold nights. I think there's just a shift in how we're seeing homelessness in Duluth. I think there's a lot of people in cars. As Stacy said, a lot of people doubled up. And a lot of single people, maybe in skyways or on the lake walk, wherever they may be, in any of our parks. I think they're out there, and I think the Coordinated Entry System is a better tool that shows us really how inflated our numbers are. We have a lot of people experiencing homelessness in Duluth. I think just some of the ways it shows are different now, but they are definitely out there.
Joel, you're with Loaves and Fishes. Are you also seeing teenagers homeless here in the city by growing numbers?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we're seeing increased numbers of people seeking shelter across age ranges. Luckily, Duluth has seen some new developments, the Center for Changing Lives by the Lutheran Social Services Program, and Lifehouse has recently opened a shelter for youth. So that's really helped reach out to those vulnerable young people who are experiencing homelessness and connect them with resources. Before the Lifehouse shelter opened, there really wasn't any.
What's bringing young people into homelessness?
Or
has it always been a problem? We just didn't hear about it.
I think it's always been a problem. Youth coming from broken homes, youth dealing with mental health issues, chemical dependency. A lot of our youth on the street are victims of sex trafficking. Once they're in the system, it's very hard to get out, and sometimes hard and shameful to go back home. And so they're left depending on the few services that are available to them.
When you're out on these counts, when you locate people, do you offer them immediate assistance, or is it just making contact with them and trying to get the information?
Well, I think it's a combination. What we've learned is when we have a lot of volunteers going out into the streets, people are used to hiding from society when they're homeless. It is shameful to them, like Joel said. What we've done is we've passed out a lot of Deb street outreach cards, and then Deb will follow up with them. What's really hard about doing the count is we say, oh, we want to interview you, take our survey, but we really don't have housing for you yet. So that gets difficult, and we count on our outreach workers and our case managers to do a lot of the follow-up.
And when you give them the survey, what information specifically are you trying to find out from them? Any of you can answer it.
Length of homelessness, disabilities, the size of family, have you had evictions, criminal history, things like that.
And are people willing to talk to you?
I would say most times they are. I mean, sometimes it's difficult with a stranger, but I would say most of the time people are open.
They want to tell their story.
And there's also an observation tool, so if people, we do have some people that have been on our streets. Quite honestly, most of the time I've lived in Duluth because they suffer from a mental health issue and they just are refusing or don't want housing, and there's nothing to force them in. So some folks like that are that ill might not be willing to take the survey, so there's a you can use an observation tool where you just observe and you know the person and you can do that survey for them. So,
And Deb, homelessness does and can lead to death. Talk to us about
oh
that.
boy, it's been a very rough year in the community. So every year there's a statewide homeless memorial. I think this year we remembered, I don't remember the exact number, 181 people. They recognize folks that have been homeless, are homeless, or formerly homeless, because homelessness can, it leads to a lot of, people die at an average age of like 47.5 that are homeless just because they're not accessing health care. They may not have good nutrition, lack of sleep, all these factors. They're not seeking medical. And in Duluth, I think we remembered, I want to say 51 this year, with just 3 of those deaths in the last 30 days. Actually, for 2018, we've had 3 already. So 51 last year and 3 this year. And so it can create a lot of trauma for people that are still on the street because, they're a community. And I think we're seeing a lot of that right now. People stick together. So, people are literally dying on our streets. We don't have medical respite. So I think sometimes at CHUM, people are discharged from the hospital who's maybe trying to have a great plan. However, the CHUM might not be the place for somebody in a medical situation. So that's something that we could really use too.
Joel, what's being done to try to increase the amount of affordable housing so that we have places for people to live? Because there's such a crisis right now in affordable housing that a lot of people who are working can't afford to make payments or pay rent.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good question because it also demystifies what, the experience of homelessness and destigmatizes it. The reality is the main cause of homelessness in our community is the lack of affordable housing. And there are other barriers that people might be living with, mental health issues or chemical dependency. But really a majority of renters in our community are paying more than they can afford for rent. And oftentimes a medical bill, a loss of a job, domestic violence could push people over the edge into homelessness. We need more units, and we need more units that are affordable. Unfortunately, there's fewer and fewer resources coming down from the federal government. Since 1996, we figured that Duluth has lost $3 million annually, adjusted for inflation, in housing funds from the federal government. So what Duluth is doing to respond, and I think across St. Louis County, is there have been a lot of collaborations, city, county government, nonprofits. The Gateway Tower Project is a really good example of that, of many different nonprofits, as well as local units of government coming together and pooling resources. That's really the only way that we can afford to create housing anymore. But if we're going to tackle this problem, we need to get bold. The Affordable Housing Coalition is calling for the creation of a local, renewable $3 million housing trust fund in St. Louis County and in Duluth to get us to where we need to go.
Where would the money for that come from?
Well, that's a great question.
Well, maybe somebody out there watching.
Exactly. We have the first step is building political will and community understanding of how serious of a crisis this is. And once we do that, I'm confident that we can find the resources.
Stacy, how many people are homeless in St. Louis County tonight?
That's $1 million question. We have 500 or more people on our wait list through the coordinated entry system just in the city of Duluth, another 50 to 80 up on the range. So they've come through the system, they've taken the assessment, and they are waiting for housing. We do have grants. We've written several new grants to deal with specifically folks with mental illness and substance abuse and for youth. So there's money coming in, but it's a hard number to track. For unsheltered people, we're seeing about 200 every year, and those are just the people that we can reach, not counting the doubled up folks and families.
You mentioned volunteers who go out and do the counting. Are you still looking for volunteers to fill some of those positions, or do they have to do training before they head out on the street? What's the process?
There is a training, and we've had a couple trainings already. So we have a significant group both on the range and in Duluth that will be doing the surveys. I think we're okay with that.
Are there ways that just members of the general public can kind of participate if they know where somebody is, or if they want to connect you with somebody? Can they?
They can connect with AEOA on the range or legal aid on the range in Duluth through the county building, the veteran services offices, and the Damiano Center and Lifehouse for Youth.
All right. Stacy, Deb, Joel, thank you all so very much for sharing this issue with us.
Thanks for having
Appreciate
us.
it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It's time now for the business news from the folks at Business North. United Airlines will use larger jet airplanes on some flights between Duluth and Chicago beginning in March. The larger Airbus A319 and A320 will be used on the first flight out and last flight in, the Duluth Airport Authority said. The enhanced service will offer Wi-Fi and personal device entertainment. The change is in response to growing market share on United's direct service. In 2017, the airline experienced a 4% passenger increase compared with 2016.
Minnesota Governor Mark Dayton was big on spending but small on details when he released his bonding recommendation Tuesday. He recommended borrowing $1.5 billion with more than 1/3 allocated to the state's college and university system. Several area projects were on his list, including $4 million to upgrade Glen Sheen Mansion. But others were missing, including improvements to Duluth's downtown central heating system. Mayor Emily Larson said Dayton supports local projects, but noted the city, as always, will have to successfully present its case to state legislators.
To remain profitable in an evolving paper market, owners of the Verso paper mill in Duluth are proposing to modify their product mix. The company hopes to convert its machinery to produce higher value paper due to lower demand and prices for its current paper. It will cost $21 million to make the conversion. Verso is seeking city support to obtain a $1 million state grant. To demonstrate its own support, the city has pledged $242,000 toward the project. Without the investment, Verso said it may have to close the plant. For more on these and other stories, visit businessnorth.com.
Now, if you have a comment on this week's show, call right now. Dial 218-788-2849 to leave a message, or send an email to Almanac North at WDSE.org. And don't forget the WDSE website, a great place to go for program updates, our latest broadcast schedule, and news and events at the station. And we're going to have to pay close attention, Julie, to the forecast this weekend to see if and where that storm might be.
I've been hearing estimates from 1 inch to 20 inches, so I have no idea what to
I'm not
expect.
going to guess. For Julie and the crew here at WDSE, I'm Dennis Henderson. Have a great weekend. Good night, everybody, and be kind.